I swear, I really am kind of shy, but I'm going to talk anyway. So this is how I arrived in CES. One night I was sitting at home. I was on my computer doing emails, and I saw an email go in my inbox, and it was an email from Nikon Mexico, and they said, "Hey, Nicole, what do you think about going to CES in Las Vegas?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I responded and said, "Yeah, that would be great. I'm really interested." And so after I answered the email, I was a little bit worried because I didn't know what I was going to be doing. He just said, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "Yes." So I didn't sleep very well that night because I was really afraid that we're going to ask me to do something like speed lights. And that's kind of like a Joe McNally thing. I'm not like him. So the next morning, after not sleeping so well, I wake up. And I'm having my morning coffee. I'm on my computer looking at my emails, as usual. And I see an email from Mike Corrado, the guy who just talked. And so he responds saying, "That's great that you're interested in coming. And well, we need to talk really soon. When are you available?" And so I said, "Well, actually, I'm not chatting, by the way. Actually, I'm available right now." So I'm sitting, I hear my phone, I look at it, unknown caller, and then I answer my phone, and of course it's Mike, and we have a conversation, and I'm really excited, he's really excited, and then I'm like, "Okay, so what is it you want me to do?" And he's like, "You know that parasailing thing that we see you do down there in Mexico?" And I'm like, "Parasailing? I don't do parasailing. How am I going to do that?" And then I'm like, "Oh, Mike, you mean paragliding." So I paraglide and I photograph at the same time. And I'm really excited because those are two of my passions in life, flying and photographing. And then so after the conversation, well, we're almost done, and I say to him, "So, you want everything in Spanish, right?" He's like, "No, everything's in English there." And I'm like, "Yes," because English really is my mother tongue. And however, I do everything in Spanish in Mexico. And so that's my story. That's how I ended up here at CES. So now you're going to see a short video of me flying. Let me move. So that is what I do. Now, do any of you meditate? Anybody? Okay, when you're meditating, you're in the moment. You're nowhere else, right? So what you just saw there is meditation in the air. And that's what I do. So I wasn't thinking about what I was going to have for lunch. I wasn't thinking about my little dog, Hunter. I wasn't thinking about work. I was thinking about the moment, or I was in the moment thinking only about paragliding, because as you know, if I'm up in the air, if I'm not really there, it's not a very forgiving sport. So that's what I do. Now, it's not an easy task flying a large piece of fabric with lots of lines hanging from it and sitting like something that's almost like a swing. Can you imagine you're in the air and you're on a swing? It's not an easy task. And then, so I have to fly. At the same time, I have to pay attention to my instruments, my flight instruments, because I need to know what altitude I'm at, because I might think I'm higher than I am. So I really need to know what I'm doing using my instruments. I need to be able to be on the radio, guiding the other pilots where I want them to be for the photos. And then I also have to try and get myself where I need to be to take the photos. And then if I'm flying in a tandem pilot, then I have to have the tandem pilot to get to where I need them to take the photos. So it's not something that it's it's not that easy to do. And as far as I know, there's not very many of us that are willing to do this, but whatever it takes to get the shot, I'm going to try it, because I don't want to have the same photos as everybody else. And I truly believe if you're taking photos of a sport, you really need to understand the sport. So more than understanding the sport, it's better to practice the sport, in my eyes. So that's what I do. Now, this photo is part of a series that I call the Acapulco Run. I'm actually in a power paraglider taking these photos. Powered paragliding is a little bit different. The difference is, I would say, about 55 pounds. And 55 pounds is, I put a motor on my back and a tank of gasoline. And so it's a little easier to take photos while doing power paragliding. So I normally fly at sea level, which means the air is denser, which means my wing will collapse less. So it's a little safer in some aspects. This trip we do in 3 days. I work in kilometers. It's 300 kilometers that we travel. So I think it's maybe 170 miles, something like that. And we fly 2 hours a day. And we only can fly 2 hours a day for 2 reasons. One, because the tank of gasoline will only last so long. And 2, we get a tailwind. We use the wind when we're flying a lot, so if we get a tailwind, that makes us go a lot faster. If I don't have a tailwind, I'm not going to arrive at my destination. So it's really important. And another thing when we're flying is we have to plan really well. If I have a gas of, in front of me, I don't have any gauges telling me how much gasoline I have, so I'm going to pretend this is a mirror. So I take my mirror and I check like this to see how much gas I have. So you really have to plan well when you're doing these types of trips. So we fly from Acapulco in the state of Guerrero, and our end destination is in Puerto Escondido, Oaxaca. Now, when we do these types of adventures, a lot of crazy things can happen, such as you could run out of gas, your motor could fail, and in this case, you can almost not see the powered paraglider there. He had to do an emergency landing because he wasn't really paying attention to how much gas he had, and he was zigzagging all over the place. He was chasing wild horses, so he had to land there and then be rescued. Sometimes the rescues are a little bit difficult. As you can see, there's not a lot of roads, and we're kind of far out, so it makes things a little complicated. There was also a couple that was doing a tandem, and they were doing a foot launch. It was kind of funny. He's this big Venezuelan guy, and his girlfriend is a Colombian. And she had never been flying before, and we told her, whenever you launch, you just got to run. You got to keep running. As you're in there, you got to keep running. So that's what she did. They launched and they took off, and she's still running. They're flying, but her legs are just going like Fred Flintstones. It was quite hilarious. Now I am here in Austria. This is a friend. Her name's Alejandra Canali. She's a Mexican pilot. And we go to Europe once a year to fly through the Alps. We normally cover Austria, Italy, Slovenia, France, Switzerland. And it's kind of neat. We go to these places, and every time I come back from Europe, somebody always goes up to me and says, wow, did you go to Paris? What'd you think? Did you like it? Or did you like Rome and Venice? And I always go back to them, I'm like, well, I didn't get to see Rome, and I didn't go to Paris. And they're like, well, how could you not go there? You were all the way in Europe. And I'm like, well, I got this. I got to see the Alps. I got to see things from a bird's eye view. I don't think you've ever seen that. So it's really, really unique, and the Alps are a wonderful place to fly. And now I am in Slovenia. Slovenia is one of my favorite places. I strongly recommend that you go there and fly. And you can also see the city and do the normal things that people do. But this place is really, really great. It's really unique. When I launch, can you imagine? This is my launch here. This is the mountain. And I'm going to fly that way to start off because the wind's coming towards me. And so on the right-hand side is the mountain range. It's absolutely beautiful. It's stunning. And then just below the mountain range, there's another little mountain. And on top of the mountain is a castle. So I get to see things like castles and graveyards. And every time I go over this graveyard, I'm up in the air and I'm thinking, is this really worth it? Like, what am I doing? Am I stupid? Like, what am I doing here? And so it's worth it. I think I'll do it, whatever it takes to get a shot that's different than other people. And this is also in Slovenia. This is my first international flight in paraglider. So we start off in Slovenia, and we travel across, I don't know if you can see, there's like a little valley here, and on the other side is Italy. So we cross over to Italy, and then we turn around and go back and fly to Slovenia, and we normally land here in Slovenia. But it's absolutely amazing because I don't know if any of you have ever seen this before. I don't know if any of you have ever been there before. It's something that's really unique, and well, for me, it's very, very interesting. Now, does anybody see something wrong with one of the paragliders here? Anybody see something different? He just put his glasses on, so maybe he can see. Anybody see something? Yeah, the tips are curved and are curled under. Yes, he's doing something we call big ears. Now, why would we want to do big ears and change the performance of our wings so it doesn't fly well? We do big ears for several different reasons. One, do you see there's a big cloud here? Do you know what clouds do when you're paragliding? They suck you up. So it's really scary, and it can be very, very dangerous. So we have to change our wings' performance so it doesn't fly. And so it's still flying, but it's not flying the same way it should fly. So we do big ears to go down quickly. We also do other maneuvers called spirals, B-stalls, a full stall, which is like an airplane. You ever heard of an airplane and they stall the engine? We could do the same in paragliders. And we do that if we need to get down really quickly, and sometimes it just happens when we don't want it to happen. So at the beginning, I showed you a quick video, and that video is actually me, while I'm flying, doing an SIV course. And what we do in those courses is we provoke our wings to do things that could happen while we're flying in real time, in real life. Things like that could happen when we're flying in thermic conditions. So our wing could have a symmetrical collapse. That means the front part of my wing is going to collapse and fold in and not fly properly. Another thing could happen is an asymmetrical collapse. One of my wingtips could fold in all the way. It can be like a 25%, a 50%, a 75%. And that means if that folds in, my wing's going to turn and do funny things. So we do these courses, provoking our wings to do these crazy things, and then we learn how to recover from it and not panic. Because that could happen, and if we panic, as I said earlier, it's not a very forgiving sport. Anybody know this mountain in the background? Anybody? I'll give you a hint. A brand name of a pen. Who said it? Mont Blanc? Yeah, this is Mont Blanc. So this is why I paraglide. I paraglide because I want to get photos of places that you normally don't get to see. And obviously everything's from above, and it's just amazing. So this is why I paraglide. Now I'm here in Switzerland. This place is known for a lot of traffic. And I don't mean paragliders. Yeah, there's normally a lot of paragliders there flying, but what's really difficult is the air traffic from commercial airlines and jets. You can see here the trails in the photos, and again on the right-hand side. So when we fly in that area, we have flying restrictions, so it makes it really, really difficult for taking photos, because instead of concentrating on flying and taking photos, I'm concentrating on my altitude more than anything else, because if I go over a certain altitude, then I get in a lot of trouble. I'm in their airspace. So can you imagine, I'm here and I'm launching. In front of me, in this particular site, there's a road or a highway. So before I get to the highway, I can go 700 meters above the launch. And then as soon as I pass the highway, then my restriction is down to 500 meters. So I really have to concentrate on my instruments and my altitude when I'm flying in this area and taking photos. And again, there's a lot of traffic here, as in paragliders, so it makes it more difficult. And this place is really, really great. It's kind of intimidating. It doesn't look intimidating here. But the last time I was there in August 2016, And I was there with some Mexican pilots, with a guy we call Yepes, Alfredo Ratia, and Enrique Cuevas. So Alfredo had never been to this site before. And we get there, and he's like looking at it, wow, genial. Like, he loved it. It's a great place. And so then he walks, all confident, walks up to the edge, and he looks down, and he's like, no mames. And in Spanish, that's like, oh my God, because it's like a cliff. So it's really difficult to launch there when there's no wind, because our wings start to fly at 13 kilometers an hour. So can you imagine? There's no wind. So we have to go to the very back of the launch, and we do a front launch for this, and we lift up our wings, and we run as fast as we can. So if our wing doesn't reach 13 kilometers an hour, adios, bye-bye. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of great places to fly in Europe and in the US. I've never flown in the US, but hopefully someday. This is another place where we go flying. It's absolutely wonderful for photography. I'm actually in Annecy. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's Annecy, France. In Spanish, we say Annecy. In French, it's Annecy. But it's absolutely beautiful. There's a huge lake. I actually have seen some cities when I'm flying or doing these paragliding trips. The little city or village is really unique. They say it's like the Venice of France. It's full of waterways. It's absolutely stunning. On this particular day, there was a world paragliding acro competition. So I got photos of the acro pilots from above. And it's really neat what they do. They do helicopters, they do sats, they do infinities, they do all these weird names that I've never even heard of, and they do it in acro. But it was great. So I was flying over, and what an acro pilot does is they have to land in the middle of the lake on a little platform. So it's really interesting, and I remember being up above, and I'm with my camera flying like this and taking photos, and one of the acro pilots goes down, and they do something it's like a death spiral. So can you imagine, they're flying like this, and his wingtip has to touch the water. He goes around, and then he makes his wing have more energy, goes up, and then he lands on the platform. Well, sometimes, when they make it. So it was really interesting. Also, on this particular day, there was a mid-air clash, or collision, and a hang glider and a paraglider crashed in the air, and they were okay. Their wings weren't okay. The hang glider was hanging on the side of a rock, and the paraglider was hanging from some trees. So things like that happen, and I don't like to get photos of accidents, but it's also kind of interesting. And this is another place. I believe it's Salève. It's also in France. It's a wonderful place for taking photos. But on this day, I almost didn't get to fly because I got in a little bit of a fight with, in Europe, the Swiss they have a lot of rules. And I just remember her. She's coming up to me. She goes, "You're not flying today." And I'm like, okay. Really? And she wasn't going to let me fly. And it was because I didn't do something the way she wanted. And I'm like, well, in Mexico, I do it. She goes, well, you're not in Mexico. You're here in France, and I'm the one who's in charge of you, so you're not going to fly. And, to cut the story short, we solved our problems, and she let me fly. So I was able to get a couple great shots flying. Now I am in Chamonix. This is the glacier. I don't know where Mont Blanc is. There's Mont Blanc. In front of Mont Blanc is Aiguille du Midi. And then just below that is a glacier. So our flight plan for the day was to go around the glacier and then land in the little village of Chamonix. And so that was the plan, but we were at launch. Can you imagine? This is the launch here. And this is where I'm going to go that way. The wind's coming this way. We're standing ready to launch. And then suddenly we hear it sounds like a jet. And there were these guys flying or going down behind us in, the flying suits, the squirrel suits. It was absolutely amazing. So those are things that happen in these types of sites. And actually, the year before, we went to the same site, but we had gone all the way up to the top. And at the top is where we really want to fly, but it's a little more technical. It's very difficult because you get to the top, you get out, you walk a little bit, and then you cross through an ice cave. When you get to the end of the ice cave, there's like a little point, and you can actually paraglide a little bit further on, but to get to that point, you have to cross. It's like, can you imagine a gymnast walking on a balance beam? It's almost like that, except we would have to have our crampons on our boots, and then a big paraglider on our back and cross and be tied in to just to get to the point to paraglide. So we didn't do it that year, and it's really difficult as well because at that type of altitude, the clouds come in, and sometimes we get a window of maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes to launch, and we're sometimes not that quick. So hopefully someday I'll go back and get photos from up there. So this is another photo. This is another pilot. He's Mexican. His name's Enrique Cuevas. And I had just turned around. I went over the glacier, turned around, and he's on my right-hand side. And yeah, that's my wingtip. I put that in there just so you know I'm flying and taking the photo. And so this is Enrique, and he's in front of, that's actually Aiguille du Midi, and Mont Blanc's right behind it, but you can't see it because of my position. And this is something else I do. They hire me to take photos of the competitions. And when they hire me to take photos of the competitions, they want branding. So I get photos of the wings, of the sponsors' names on the wings. There's a little ledge. You can see some people down. This is actually where we launch from. This is what a site looks like. And right on this point is where I normally go and take photos. If I'm not flying, I'm down there taking photos of the pilots, and so they launch and they go right over me. It's absolutely incredible. And I also get photos of branding, and from the sponsors' names are on all of the banners, so I get pictures of the pilots holding their wings and photos like that. This is another way of doing branding. I don't actually want the ozone, I want the other pilot that's in behind. And this is a photo that all the pilots always want. You know, whenever we land, the pilots come up to me. They no longer have their glasses on or their buff or their helmets, and they come up to me and they're like, "Hey, did you get that photo of me?" And I'm like, "Well, who are you? And what's your wing look like?" And then he tells me what his wing looks like, and I'm like, "Well, you know, there's 5 other wings like yours, so I don't know if I got your photo, but this is definitely a photo that a lot of the pilots want." Other things happen when we're flying. We get pictures or photos with the moon in the background. Sometimes I like to get photos with a sunburst. This is a place called the Three Kings. It's in Valle de Bravo in Mexico. It's a place very unique, well, to us, to the locals there, but it's also a place where there's a lot of narcotraficos. I guess the drug lords is the word in English. But so I try not to go to this place very often, because if you land there, you could get into a lot of trouble. Some of my friends that are pilots, they've landed there before, and the guards, they come out with guns. So that's a place that I try to avoid, but it's really, really nice. If I'm in a tandem pilot, then I will fly here. And I'm going to try to convince all of you that the smell of garbage is great. And the smell of manure, the smell of smoke, smell of lavender might be a little more appealing to you, but I say that because to the right of this photo is actually a dump. And so when we're flying and we start smelling things up at 3,000 meters above sea level, that means hot air is going up. If you smell something, hot air is going up. That means I'm going to get a thermal. That means I'm going to get altitude, and that means I'm going to get further. So I do like the smell of manure when I'm flying. This is a photo of a volcano in Mexico. It's known for the snow that it gets every year, except in this photo there's no snow. But those are the things we get to see. We get to fly over volcanoes depending on the altitude, because sometimes they're just too high, and, well, obviously there's not a lot of air at that height, so unless you're equipped with oxygen, then we don't normally go to these areas. But this is during a competition. Actually, the paraglider that's yellow, he's a Croatian pilot, and he now lives in Mexico because this is a great site for flying. It's one of the best places in the world. I didn't. There. Now, this is what we call a gaggle. Sometimes in the competitions, in this particular photo, there's not 130 pilots, but normally in a competition, a paragliding competition, there's 130 pilots minimum. Can you imagine flying with so many pilots and not crashing with them? So that's why we have flying regulations. And so they're actually, it's called a gaggle, but they're in a thermal. So they're all in the same thermal, thermaling up, trying to get as high as they can. So where I fly, our rule is on odd days, we turn left. Even days, we turn right. If the mountain's on my right-hand side, I have the right of way. And so I guess it's kind of like sailing. I don't know, I'm not a sailor, but so this is what we call a gaggle. And believe it or not, there's not a lot of mid-air collisions. This is the pilots. It's not a gaggle. They're actually at the start. And I'm just going to go quickly through a lot of these photos because I don't have a lot of time left. This is during a competition in Brazil. It's a World Cup. These are pilots that fly in teams. They use the same wings and same harnesses. These are just more pilots during the competition and different types of photos that I try to get. This is also a gaggle, and I'm above them. And what I want to say here is, can you imagine trying to take a photo from a helicopter? Do you know what that would do to these pilots? It would be like taking all of those pilots and putting them in a blender and then turning the blender on. So that's why we don't take photos of paragliding in helicopters. I'm just going to go quickly through the different types of photos. This is at launch. This is when they're taking off. These are also things that happen when pilots are taking off. And then this is what I do from the photos. I do photos for the competitions, for the organizers, for the pilots, and this is what I do for myself. I put everything in black and white and make it a little more artistic. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I actually take the photos. Oops, I have to go back. And let's see. So this is me paragliding, and I will show you how I take photos while I'm paragliding. So here's my flight deck in front of me. I have my variometer on the right-hand side. It's the beeping you hear is when I'm going up, and the boo is when I'm going down. So ideally, I want to stay up to be taking photos. My variometer tells me my wind direction, my ground speed, how strong the thermals are, and several other options. And in the middle, I have a cell phone. And on my left-hand side, I have my Nikon D800E with an 18 to 200 millimeter lens. This lens isn't as good as some of my other lenses for flying, but this is the one I tend to use most of the time because it gives me quite a wide range, and I really don't want to be switching lenses in the air. So I'm going to turn here. This is a thermal. And so ideally, while flying, we always want to have a lot of altitude. And that's what I'm trying to do, get back up really high again, because when I take photos, then I'm not concentrating on flying as much, and I'm going down, I'm not going up. So I'm going to try and gain a little more altitude, and then I'm going to show you what I do with the camera. Right now I'm at 2,522 meters. The launch that I launched from is 2,371 meters, so I'm up a little bit, but ideally for taking photos, I like to be a little higher. I'm at 2630 now. I want to get just a little bit higher, and I'm going to cross over to the Peñón, which is a nice rocky mountain here to my right. So I'm going to cross over there now, because I see a group of paragliders over there, and I'd like to get some photos of them. So I'm going to take my camera out of my cockpit here, and of course I have it attached. And what I normally do is when I want to change my focal distance, First I have to unlock it. And I don't want to be swaying back and forth like that because I'm in altitude. So I normally want to go. And I take photos this way. And I change, like I said, focal length. But I want to grab my handle because I keep pressure on my wing. And it's really, really important to have pressure on my wing, especially in summer conditions like here in Valle de Bravo. And so this is what I do. Put it back in here, and I'm going to try and get a little closer. Now I'm down to 2,527 meters, and I keep going down. As you can hear my variometer. I'm a little bit closer now. Nice speed. Try and get some more altitude here. And now that was just a nice big collapse. I'm gonna get out of here. It's not very clean. I'm gonna go into the landing now because it's a little bit too bumpy. And what I try to do before I land, I try to connect my camera again so it just stays where it's supposed to stay. So now my camera's clipped back into the cockpit so it won't go flying out. Now I'm just going to do a spiral to get down a little lower. So that is what I do, and I hope you'll come and join me on my next adventures. I'm leaving tonight for Colombia to do photos of the super final of the PWC, which is the Paragliding World Cup. And if you want to contact me, here's all my contact information. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies